So, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Derby City Council's Council Cabinet at 4 o'clock on Wednesday the 14th of April 2021. Before I get into the formal business of the meeting, can I just say that we will all be aware of the recent sad passing of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. And as we find ourselves in a period of official mourning, I think it's appropriate that we should join together now in a period of reflection upon His Highness's lifetime of service to our nation, the Commonwealth and its peoples. So if you don't mind joining me now for that period of appropriate silence, thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for that period of reflection. We can now commence with the main business of the meeting. So I'm going to turn to the agenda. And item 1, I believe, is apologies.
Councillor Graves, Andy Smith and Emily Feenan.
Okay, thank you. And if you don't mind, I think probably Councillor Holmes should record his absence too. So I don't think any of these items are classed as late items, Karen?
No, that's correct.
So item 3 then will be the receipt of petitions.
There are none.
To my knowledge, there are none. So identification of urgent items to which calling will not apply.
Again, there are none.
Okay, thank you. In that case, declarations of interest, please. Take silence to be none then. Item 6 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of March this year. Can those be agreed, Cabinet?
Chair, could I just ask a couple of questions on those minutes, please?
You certainly can.
Thank you. Minute 144/20, the Beckett-Well performance venue update. You'll recall on the 15th of July Cabinet meeting last year, this agenda item was also on the agenda at that meeting. I just wanted some clarification because I do believe the decision is due to be signed off and the forward funding agreement being made later on this month potentially without any further scrutiny committee meeting or council cabinet meetings, and I was just wondering whether the business case is going to be made available for public scrutiny, member scrutiny, as you committed to in July, or has that ship sailed, and will this council potentially be committing itself to circa £45 million worth of spend without any further public scrutiny?
We're at the point of checking whether there's any problems with the minutes, Councillor Shanker. Do you have a problem with the minutes? Is there something not recorded accurately in the minutes?
Precisely what I've just said, Chair. I was just seeking clarification on the public scrutiny of the business case and what Derby would get for this investment. As you clearly stated, this would come back to Council Cabinet. I'm just concerned there's not another Cabinet meeting scheduled between now and potentially, I think it's the 20th or the 21st of April, that we could be signing up to the forward funding agreement committing the expenditure.
Okay, well, I'm not prepared. This isn't the point for reopening debates from the past meeting. I'm content.
It's not something I intend to debate.
I'm content that the minutes accurately reflect the meeting. So, any other points?
So you're not prepared to answer that question, is that right?
I'm saying I regard the minutes as an accurate record of the meeting. Was there anything else?
So there's no further public scrutiny.
Was there anything else? Were there any other? Yes. Were there any issues of the minutes?
I just want to seek clarification on the minutes, whether there will be any public scrutiny of the business case.
I think, as I say, I believe the minutes make that perfectly clear and an accurate record. Does anybody else have any queries with the minutes, please? In that case,
no,
Cabinet, can we agree them?
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you. In that case, then we'll move on to item 7 is the recommendations of the Executive Scrutiny Board, and I propose to deal with those in the normal manner by referring to the recommendations at each particular item. And so we'll move on to item 8, which is the recommendation for the Children's and Young People's Board. Who's going to introduce that for us, please? Camille?
Well, it's normally it would normally be the chair, sir, of the scrutiny board. I'm not sure if she's on the meeting.
I can help you there. She was not given an invite, so she is not here. So I will speak if there's anything to say.
Okay.
I'm happy to take it, Chair.
Yeah, she did send a couple of emails with attachments to Councillor Williams on the matter.
Okay, so Yvonne, it's your portfolio if you want to just give us headlines on it, please.
Yeah, so the recommendation that has come from the CYP Scrutiny Board was to have the Council Cabinet co-produce an education otherwise than at school offer for Derby with parents, carers and children and young people to ensure that Derby City Council are meeting their statutory duties to provide an offer that Derby can be proud of. I'm happy to fully agree this recommendation and have already been working in co-production with parents over the past 18 months on SEND provision, including EOTAS packages. So very happy to accept the recommendations that have come from the CYP scrutiny there.
Okay, so Ruth, did you want to add to that?
Yes, I think the officers who were at the scrutiny meeting did say that obviously the council has not got a specific policy at the moment, but they felt that it would be quite feasible to pull that in with other work that they are currently doing, particularly obviously with SEND provision. So they were quite happy to be doing the work. And I believe Councillor Lynn sent Councillor Williams some examples of work that has already been done in other authorities, namely Derbyshire and North Yorkshire.
Thank you, Ruth. So in the absence of any other comments or questions, Cabinet, can we agree the recommendations from the CYP Scrutiny Board?
Agreed.
Agreed.
In that case, we can move on to item 9 then, the school's capital programme for 21-22. Phase 1 schemes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to draw out headlines if people are happy with that.
Thank you.
So in terms of this report, it's setting out a range of maintenance projects for schools that are maintained schools managed by Derby City Council, Whilst the council is awaiting final allocations from the Department for Education for next year, we believe the maintenance allocation for next year will be around 1.3 million, plus existing funding available on the programme results in around a £2 million programme. Appendix 2 sets out the schemes. 4.5 in the report outlines the categories of those maintenance schemes in terms of mechanical projects, roof works, window replacement, external works and fire precaution. And the report sets out at 4.6 the main schemes that are there, Chair, and the recommendations are outlined in points 2.1 to 2.4. Happy to take any questions, Chair, and then I'll respond to the recommendation from scrutiny yesterday. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So, Yvonne, anything to add? I'll tell you what, I'll do the, I'll put the recommendation first, so in case you want to comment, Yvonne. And the Exec Scrutiny Board resolves to recommend to Council that it ensures that the investments that are being done are future-proofed, whatever that means, for a zero carbon future, such as higher than standard insulation levels, stronger roofs for PV readiness, and options for air-ground sourced heat, as investment now will save in the future. Councillor Repton, that's your committee's recommendation. Was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think it's all there included in the recommendation, Chair, and you just highlighted how it would future-proof for a zero carbon future was looking at issues such as insulation, stronger roofs, PV readiness, and options for air-ground source heating as investment now will serve in the future. Thank you, Chair.
So, Gamal, it might be appropriate for you to respond first then in terms of the plans for decarbonising or trying to carbon zero-proof these developments.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, noting that these are maintenance schemes to existing buildings. So, Chair, in response, all schemes set out in the report will comply with modern building regulations and will be in line with DFE building bulletin guidance. The schemes will be designed to help reduce carbon emissions by providing better modern insulation, glazing material and more efficient heating systems. And where feasible, all works are planned and undertaken in readiness to allow further future works on sustainability and to make improvements to support climate change sustainability. So those factors will be considered in relation to taking forward these schemes. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Williams, then your portfolio, are you happy with the wording and we can accept this recommendation or not?
It's not about accepting that recommendation, it's accepting what Gamal has just explained to us there, bearing in mind that these buildings are older buildings, so I think it's where feasible we will do all that we can to future-proof and to lower the carbon emissions as low as we can get. But I think it would be unwise to say that we could zero carbon future at the moment because of the nature of the buildings. So I think we need to look at the words that Gamal has just put out for us.
Okay. So, Councillor Repton, with that caveat, in terms of absolutely committing to do what is absolutely feasible, sensible to do, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, as comfortable as I can be. I think we're being told that as much as is humanly possible and economically possible will be done to achieve what the executive scrutiny would like to see. So, yeah, thank you.
Unfortunately, I think it's because of the individual circumstance, I don't think we're able to give a carte blanche at this point, but we absolutely acknowledge the points that have been raised and we'll do our best to do so.
Okay.
Good. So with that in mind, unless there are any other questions or comments?
No, I'm happy, Chair.
in that case, we can, Cabinet, can we approve recommendations 2.1 to 2.4?
Approve.
Approved.
Thank you. Item 10 then, Ravensdale Infant School and Nursery, a new school project.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll draw out headlines. So this report outlines the proposal to build a new school at Ravensdale Infant and Nursery School following the major fire back in October. The report outlines that the budget cost of this scheme, subject to tendering and framework process, is 7.5 million, and the council remains in discussions with its insurers in relation to the final settlement from insurers, and that won't be confirmed until the end of the project, once all costs have been determined. 4.3 in the report outlines that the scheme has been designed and will include fire sprinklers. Key deadlines are working towards planning permission in May, start on site in July 2021, and the new school building being ready for June 2022. Chair, 4.5 in the report outlines there is a confidential report on the agenda in part 2 on more detailed financial information. And in terms of design development, 4.6 outlines the design has been developed in close partnership with Ravensdale Infants and Nursery School governing body and the council, and robust governance arrangements are in place. And recommendations are outlined in 2.1 to 2.3. Happy to take any questions.
From my point of view, Camille, just thank you and congratulations to the team for the progress made on this. It's an unfortunate incident, but we have made significant good progress on the work to be able to replace this essential school facility. So if you can record that with your team, I'd be obliged. In relation to exec scrutiny, with a similar recommendation to the previous one, in that they resolved to recommend to Council Cabinet that it builds a new school to be zero carbon ready, so that fabrics such as insulation levels, roof strengths for PVs are included at this stage, together with additional connections for mechanical and electrical services as appropriate. Are we in a similar situation to the responses last time?
Yes, we are slightly, Chair. I'll respond to a bit more information, and Chair, because there's quite a lot of technical information, we'll circulate something separate outside of this meeting to members for a full understanding of that. So briefly, to say that the new school will be designed to modern regulations based on DfE guidance and be energy efficient, and will produce fewer carbon emissions than the school it replaces. There are a range of additional features in the new design, just outlining brief information to help with carbon emissions. There is a modular design and a different type of foundation solution rather than traditional piled foundation to help with carbon emissions. There's a more modern, efficient boiler system and plant design, which obviously is possible with a new design. Gas supply mechanisms or approaches are being used creatively to minimise gas to help in the boiler plant, but using more electrical aspects. More modern LED lighting throughout, modern insulations, floors, walls and roofing, strict compliance on air tightness of the building with modern ventilation and preventing heating loss, double glazed windows. So in summary, Chair, the design has a range of modern facilities to minimise carbon emissions. Clearly very difficult to say to be zero carbon neutral, but there are some significant features within the new design specifically to help with climate change. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so Councillor Repton, I'm not sure that there is a specific standard here for this as yet, and zero carbon ready is not an expression I've heard or understand. Is there anything else you wanted to say in respect of introducing this recommendation?
Well, I think my committee was assuming that we're going to hold this council to its word, that we aim to be a zero carbon council within a period of time. And I think being a new school, we have the opportunity to move in that direction. Now, in the private part of the meeting today, I can go into, with our recommendation, more closer details, which I think will help in answering what you're posing now, Chair. So I think I'll reserve my comments to that closed section where I'll give an example of what I think we ought to look at. So thank you for that.
Okay, I'll invite Councillor Williams, whose portfolio it is, to speak on our behalf. But I'm sure there's no doubt in our commitment to make this new building as carbon reduced as possible. Councillor Williams. Are you there, Yvonne, or are you muted?
Yeah, no, sorry, I wasn't muted. It dropped me out
Okay.
just as you were coming to me. So thank you very much, Chair. I'm presuming you just asked if I'd like to speak because I didn't hear that. Lovely, thank you. So first of all, before I answer on the scrutiny side of it, I too would just like to say thank you to the head teacher, the chair of governors, the parents, carers and the pupils, and to Gamel's team and other teams within the council that have all worked really hard to get us to this stage in a very tight time scale. I'd also like to point out to everybody that we made a commitment to introduce sprinklers to any new builds that we were in charge of at the council, and I'm happy to see that those are in. We had joined forces with the chief fire officer, and I'm really pleased that we're going to be doing that for this school. So a big thank you to everybody involved in getting us this far, and I'm looking forward to seeing the school being built, as are, I'm sure, the staff, pupils and parents. In terms of what we can do, you've heard from Gamal of some of the features. It's not an exclusive list, but some of the features that have been put into the building, or will be put into the building, to help us in to be carbon zero carbon ready, I suppose, or as carbon neutral as we can get. And I would like to say that as much as we can do, we will be doing. So again, a thank you to the team, and to just say we're really, really looking forward to seeing this building come back into use so that the children can get back to their school. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions at this point? No, in that case, then, Cabinet, are we okay to agree?
Councillor Poulter, it's Councillor Skelton. I have asked in the chat.
Sorry, I missed that, Ruth. Yeah, by all means, carry on.
Right, I was just really wanting, I suppose, perhaps addressing this question to Gamal. He's obviously been through a number of features that are going to be in this building. Are all those actually just to the current building regulation standards, or do we in any of them go above and beyond?
Chair, we do go above and beyond, because when you look at standard regulations, they are pretty standard. So the features that kind of I've briefly outlined are going beyond standard and introducing features on sustainability. So yes is the answer to that.
And could I just ask again then, so does it, do you anticipate the building having a particular BREEAM rating?
No, Chair, we don't have that information to hand. And also, in terms, if I look at it from a DFE perspective, BREEAM is less used in that space at this stage. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but it is less used. So what I can say is that the additional design features on sustainability included within this scheme won't have a rating, which is no longer a specific requirement from the DFE, but is certainly a more efficient building design, for example, that you would have from schools that are directly designed by the Department for Education. So as a result of sort of commitments to add in extra features. So in summary, BREEAM is no longer used as the benchmark, but there are design incorporated within the scheme which are over and above standard to help with climate change sustainability and make the building more efficient in terms of carbon emissions. I hope that's answered the question as best I can in that context. Thank you, Chair.
Sort of, yes. So is there something else that has replaced BREEAM so that we can actually sort of have some sort of benchmark? Because obviously you said there's certain features and that, but I still haven't got in my mind quite how much above the standard, sort of bog standard, what requirements are, the minimum standards overall, because obviously BREEAM would assess the whole sort of package. Is there any other thing that the Department of Education uses that so you can actually have a comparing buildings with other buildings?
Thank you, Chair. Just to answer that, I think the short answer to that is no. And so if I reflect, many years ago, there were specific regulations and specific DFE requirements on BREEAM. Those regulations have changed over the period, so there is no longer an explicit requirement on school design nationally in relation to sustainability BREEAM as rigorous perhaps it was some years ago. Therefore, I would expect most authorities and most school designs will be looking at features of sustainability and climate change, but no longer an explicit requirement to achieve a BREEAM rating of X. So as just to give you a very brief example, when you look in the city at Noel Baker, new school design, very massive, you can't compare it to this. In order to progress that in the journey, there were gate waste system on BREEAM rating. That is no longer the case in regulations at this stage, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? No, in that case then, Cabinet, can we agree recommendations 2.1 to 2.3?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then to contract and financial procedure matters. At item 11, compliance with contract and financial procedure rules. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. This is the standard report that we receive at all of the Cabinet meetings, and there's 4 items on this report. One is seeking approval for accepting Section 31 grants for public health of just over £400,000, and this is to be targeted at reducing crime and death associated with drug misuse. I draw members' attention to how we want to target in the city, which also reaches some of those groups, such as aiming to help women who use drugs who are victims of lifelong adversity. So this will complement the incredible work we've done over the past year in helping people with complex needs and add to that approach. So very welcome Section 31 grant, but it has to be used for that purpose. The second part of the report is in respect of the government's Levelling Up Fund. So on the 3rd of March, the Chancellor announced that the government was opening up a sort of bidding round for the Levelling Up Fund of 4 million to 4.8 million over the life of this Parliament. This is going to be administered or targeted through local authorities, which is welcome, as opposed to previously where it tended to be administered by the LEP. This is the first bidding round, which has a submission date of the 18th of June. And the criteria for the first bidding round are around 3 themes. One being regeneration of town and city centres, one being smaller transport projects and one being maintaining and expanding cultural and heritage assets. There's an indication the first round will be between 400 to 600 million, and authorities were prioritised on whether they were priority 1, 2 or 3 in respect of a levelling up fund. We were alongside 104 authorities, priority 1. The government criteria is very tight in respect of this, that you will need to demonstrate 3 things. Firstly, that you can spend in year in 21-22, which is a challenge from when the announcement was made. Secondly, that they will be looking at the mixture across the country against the 3 themes I've just said. And third, that they'll look at the geographical distribution. So what this does is we are developing proposals around the Levelling Up Fund, and if we're in a position to submit by the 18th of June, this gives permission for that submission to happen, especially around giving a delegation linked to we will have only just started the new municipal year. In reality, it is, if we look at Gateway 1, which is spend in 21-22, it may be more timely for the council to consider whether to enter the next bidding round in order to have a much more robust business case, as opposed to, because this is not about expressions of interest. So this isn't about one chance, take it or lose it. It's about making the difference with a robust business case that will deliver that real impact in local areas, and the government is wanting MP support for that. And again, the leader has had discussions with MPs of all of our 3 MPs about the Levelling Up Fund. So that's the Levelling Up Fund. The third part of here is in respect of acceptance of Nhs funding following the closure of the 3 wards at London Road Community Hospital. And this is really testament to the CCG wanting to build on our successful sort of hospital discharge arrangements via the council's existing Home First and new enhanced care pathway. So you can see in there the majority of the new enhanced care pathway, but it's also nice to see that they will help fund the continuation of the temporary funded social work posts and occupational support in the integrated discharge hub that we know was very successful at the Royal Derby during the pandemic. And finally, Chair, and I think it's, I just want to highlight here that the COVID funding that we've received in 2020-2021 is detailed in Appendix 1 to this report. It does show that the government has provided a lot of funding to support us in our pandemic response, both in direct support to businesses, in supporting the council with the impact of the pandemic, supporting the social care sector in areas like infection control, supporting the public health service, and for example, the support for outbreak management and test and trace, and we now have test and trace operating in the city, and also supporting people in financial hardship. So the figure there is 143,967,000, so a significant amount in addition to obviously what we spent on behalf of the council taxpayers in the city. And this is just to capture that in accordance with our financial procedure rules of all the grants we've received in the year. They were coming at such a speed it wasn't possible to document them as they came during the year, but we wanted to just acknowledge that in this report at the end of the year. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Simon, you're describing with reference to particularly the levelling up bid, you're describing very tight timescales there, and reference to the fact that no decision's actually been taken as to whether to actually bid into the first round or not. If the decision was to go with a full expression of interest in relation to the levelling up funding at this point, would there be time to consult with full council, consult with the public, and then bring back the full bid for scrutiny before submitting the expression of interest on the 18th of June?
My judgment would be that there would be insufficient time, and I'll give some context to that. Firstly, when the Chancellor made his announcement, I think many of us thought it was going to be expressions of interest. When the detailed guidance came out, it was requiring a fairly detailed full business case, which is a much more, it needs populating a lot more, and the work involved in it. If we have a look at the areas which are there, the regeneration, culture and transport, the guidance that we're seeing is that that should probably be a significant scheme that will make a real difference to the people of the areas in receipt of it. And on that basis, I don't think there'd be time, especially as I commented with the new municipal year, to do a full consultation, to receive that consultation, to scrutinise it and to submit a bid by the 18th, which is why I've indicated that at the moment we have not eliminated the possibility of putting in a levelling up bid, but the likelihood is that we would have a scheme ready for a future funding round rather than this one, in order to get the greatest chance of success in securing this in what is a competitive bidding round. So my answer is I don't think we could do a full consultation, which would be meaningful if we were to hit that deadline, which is why I'm caveating that we might access future bidding rounds.
So a vital part of this process is having the backing of the local MPs. We're already, as you described, into that process, and we have another meeting with them tomorrow. But just to confirm, this is actually, the decision is one for the executive, for the cabinet to decide when and if to put and what bids to put into this funding round.
It is an executive function, and it is for the strong leader model and the cabinet to make that decision. And obviously you will, as an executive, try and consult as widely as you can, like you have done with the MPs, and it's also been mentioned in various other briefings that we've made to members. But yes, it is an executive decision.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to turn to Councillor Repton, who came with some recommendations last night, the first one of which I have to say seems to be a blatant attempt to politicise this issue where there shouldn't be politics, but I'm going to give you the opportunity, Martin, to introduce the recommendations from last night.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't any attempt at all, Chris, genuinely, from anybody on my committee, and including Conservatives who never voted for it, but they abstained, they didn't vote against it. However, I think it was recognised that this is basically a lottery bid, and it's totally insufficient when we look at the problems facing not only Derby, but every city throughout this country. And we all felt that what is really needed is a national recovery plan of a scale similar to the New Deal in America after World War II, and that's properly funded. Because this will only be a bit like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic if we're not careful. There were problems facing all cities prior to COVID, but COVID's put booster rockets under those, where we see people buying online far, far more than we ever envisaged would happen, out-of-town shoppings. And I think the whole, all the aspects, including rents, business rates, and how to attract other diverse traders into the city centre needs to be looked at, but that can only be done with a national plan. So that's why the recommendation is there. But if also I can just make a very quick comment on page 7 with regard to track and trace. We already see that billions of pounds was wasted on the disastrous track and trace. What assurances are there that the £1.8 million that will be spent locally on track and trace will be value for money? Thank you, Chair.
Well, that's not included in your recommendations, Martin. And as for item 1 in your recommendations, the answer is no. We certainly won't be making those sort of representations to the Minister as a Cabinet in any way, shape or form. The other recommendations we have just had explained to us are impractical for a bid for the 18th of June, so we're unable to agree those, but we will commit to making to as much consultation as is possible during the process, and we've started that with the essential consultation with the MPs. Any other questions, comments in relation to?
Can I just ask on that? But because there were 4 other recommendations, so that means there'll be no consultation with.
I just gave you, Martin, opportunity to introduce them.
Sorry?
I just gave you opportunity to speak to those recommendations.
Yeah, well, they are all as printed, so I won't waste the Cabinet's time going through them word by word. But I think what encapsulates them all is that, unlike the COVID travel scheme, which was pushed through where we never had a proper consultation, and that was regrettable, we're in danger of having a deja vu here, where we're not able to engage with key partners and councillors in this process. And I think that's to be regretted, Chair.
I'm afraid that's the time. That's partially a consequence of the timescales, and you've had the commitment from us to do what we can, but you've also heard that it is an executive decision that Cabinet will have to make in the meantime. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Yes, please, Chair. It's in the chat.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Schenker.
Thank you. So we, in principle, welcome the Levelling Up Fund, and not just welcoming the fund, but I think in there is a recognition of austerity has damaged public services quite bad since 2010, and I hope you don't dismiss that as a party political point, because there's members and indeed MPs from all parties who are now beginning to recognise that, and we've seen evidence of that in Derby, in the council itself, but also in our response to COVID, where cuts made over the last decade have been far too deep to be sustained, and unfortunately the impact of that has borne out over the last 12 months or so. £4.8 billion is therefore welcome. It is a huge amount of money, but if you compare that to the wasted track and trace £37 billion, again, it just puts it into context. And then when you divide that into further phases, and we're told the first phase is, I think it's 600 or 800 million pounds, it again reduces the amount that is available. I think it's absolutely vital Derby bids for that pot of money. It's absolutely needed in Derby, and getting a bid together with everybody's support, including our MP support, which I believe is a criteria for the submission of a bid, is really important, and it's good all 3 MPs have been involved in hopefully preparing the bid. It's a little bit disappointing at this stage not to see any detail of what we're likely to put in to that bid. I appreciate it may be a executive function to determine what goes in that bid, but it would have been nice to be able to discuss in this paper what potentially we're thinking of putting in that bid, if it's only just to be open and transparent, and I know you like to be open and transparent, so discussing potential ideas for that bid I would have thought would be sensible. I appreciate what Simon Riley has said around the consultation, and the timescales have meant it's challenging, and we may not be able to do the consultation and the due process needed before middle of June to submit for this first round, and I think it's vital we do submit to the first round and not just defer to a future round, because that could potentially mean we're missing out on much needed investment for Derby. First question is around that. Is there a requirement stipulated in the bid to ensure there is consultation, or is it the consultation can happen after a potential bid? I think it's important, as I said, we get that first bid in and we hit that first round, because once that's allocated, it's not going to be available for us to go back into. Likewise, I think few other concerns I have, and the paper talks about the need to prepare a business case, and I think that's really important from my conversations earlier today and previous meetings. When you kick off a significant investment project like this, it's absolutely vital we have a clear understanding of what our requirements are and what the benefits of them of that investment will be for Derby. So a business case is the document that pulls that together, just as we should have one for the new Beckett Well Arena. We should absolutely have one for any potential funding for the Levelling Up Fund. So, when would that be available for us to see? When do we get to understand what is going to be in the bid as far as tangible returns are concerned? So that's my concerns around the Levelling Up Fund, Chair. But just so I'll pose a few other questions, and then I won't have to come back in. I'm also conscious that we want to avoid what happened with the Future High Streets Fund, whereas we put a bid in and everything was just scaled back nationally, and then we had to compromise our position on a number of projects and put in a further submission because we didn't get the funding which we needed to deliver on our initial ambitions. So what reassurance can officers or yourself maybe offer us that there won't be this scaling back this time, and given we've been put in category 1 as the highest need, we'll get the funding required? And then finally, and I'm not sure whether you can help me or the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods can help me, I do believe there was a Safer Streets Fund which we initially successfully with the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office applied for funding and were awarded funding to tackle antisocial behaviour and crime hotspots in Darley Ward. I'm disappointed to see in this financial matters report, and I did do an FOI through Derbyshire Constabulary. There are a number of areas across Derby which would have qualified for further Safer Streets funding, but the council, for some reason, which hopefully will get explained to us this afternoon, didn't decide we wanted to bid for any further funding for the Safer Streets funding, or indeed we didn't want to bid in the second round, I believe it was. Is there any rationale you could share with us why we didn't bid for that? And that's it for me for now. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so Simon, any thoughts on the consultation? I don't think they're in the prospectus or the guidelines so far. I've not seen any reference to the need for consultation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, the prospectus talks about that councils should, with their bid, aim to make the biggest difference. So it's obviously informed by our whole approach to communities regeneration and everything else, and that is part of an evidence base, as Councillor Shanker will know, that goes into the business case for why and the rationale. So it's not about necessarily creating new, it's using the intelligence we have. It's also one of the goals here is they call it net zero goals. It needs to demonstrate that, and as part of the discussion earlier, it's about understanding what that is and how any investment would support the net zero goals. But the focus of the government in this has been that in order for a bid to be successful, it needs to be consulted on and supported by the MPs. That is the requirement. Obviously, MPs and yourselves are all democratically accountable people. So on that one, that is what the prospectus says, and the prospectus and the guidance is available on the website. So if I can, Chair, having just searched for Safer Streets in this committee report, I can't find reference to Safer Streets when I do a word search. So I don't know, unfortunately, what Councillor Shanker was referring to there. So if we could do some clarity there, it would help.
Well, I think, Simon, it was directed at police and crime commissioners, and from my point of view, I wouldn't have wanted to make any any bids that might have compromised any bids that he was making for Darley, which is obviously a very important ward to him this year in particular. Although it wasn't, Darley ward is not the ward with the highest crime rate. So I was a little bit confused by his approach to the Safer Streets funding, but we wouldn't have wanted to bid into the same thing to complicate it for him. So that's that on that one. High Street funding, Baggy, you mentioned what can we do to guard against not getting the full allocation. Well, we can't. It's for the government, for the department to decide how they allocate the money according to their criteria, and they chose to allocate it on a reduced basis across the country. We weren't an exception. We didn't get more, we didn't get less percentage of the bids that we put in. And Simon, as far as I know, there's no way of trying to influence how the government deals out what funding it has.
Can I just come back in on the Safer Streets funding, Chair? With that,
no, because it's not on this document. Chris, can I speak, please?
Our officers.
Yes, Baggy, I'll bring you back in. Baggy, I'll bring you back in a minute, because before you move on to that, Nicola wants to comment on the general comments that we've had so far. So, Councillor Ralston.
Yes, I suppose the important part is that is absolutely not on this documentation. So again, you referred to it earlier, Chris, but in relation to party politics playing games at this particular point, it still confuses me that Councillor Repton and Councillor Shanker in one breath condone this, the levelling up funding given by government, and then in the next breath welcome it and say it's crucial that we bid into it at this point. I think they need to get themselves straight within their own party first, but from our perspective as a council, the most important thing is doing the right thing for the city. Any council across the city is going to have a difficulty in bidding into this. It has to be a shovel ready, almost prepared, fully costed up bid, if you like, and the reality is that depending on those that do come in this first round, and that's the critical part, it is the first round of bidding, and we've got to get it right for the city, and that's the sort of message from me really, is that we certainly need to make sure that we get the bid in the right place. There have been questions raised around potential applications and plans within the city that might fall into this criteria, and that we'll progress them as we can, but moving forward we have to get this right for the city. So I wouldn't push us to bid in straight away. It needs to be the correct one. In terms of Councillor Repton's earlier comments, he spoke as we as the committee, and I think that was again disingenuous. There were members of the group that were not either did not speak or did not contribute to those conversations. So again, I just think we need to be careful here that we speak as a council, as an administration, that we have to work for the betterment of the city rather than playing party politics, as that continues to happen within this authority, which is extremely disappointing.
So I've got Councillor Skelton and Councillor Webb, I think, want to come in. But I can just get this thing out of the way with the Safer Streets funding. Councillor Rawson's quite right. There's nowhere on this financial matters that comes into this equation. But in the fairness of in the spirit of open transparency, being as you've raised the subject and the public might be interested in what you're saying, Baggy, can you confirm that it was offered to the local authorities other than the police and crime commissioners or whatever? Has you got anything to add in relation to that point?
I mean, firstly, I'd just say I was surprised that our Section 151 officer has had to Google Safer Streets and can't find anything. The finance director has confirmed to me that the first project, or a project on Safer Streets, has been delivered or is being delivered, and we're exploring ideas for future bids. But my concern is, Chair, is from what I believe and the information I've seen, the Police and Crime Commissioner's office wrote into the council to put in a further joint bid, and the council failed to respond to that. And if I then asked further questions on what areas of the city would be eligible to the Home Office criteria to be able to apply for that bid. And I was astounded when I got the response to that. There's obviously, as you could expect, many areas in the inner city parts of the city that were eligible, but there was areas in Spondon, in Mickleover, in Mackworth, lots of areas in Derby which could have potentially benefited from applying jointly with the Police and Crime Commissioner for access to that fund.
Okay, so I know nothing of that opportunity to jointly bid personally. But I have to say, as I said earlier on, I wouldn't want to have bid into anything that complicated the Police and Crime Commissioner's fantastic job that is done in relation to bidding into this fund. But I am still a little bit confused. If they felt that there were opportunities across the city, why he's made both applications in relation to Darley, but maybe only he can answer that. So we'll
maybe
move
a cabinet
on.
member would want to comment on that.
So maybe we'd move on because it's not on the agenda anyway, and I don't think we can add anything more useful to that now. So I think it was probably Ruth that asked to come in first.
Thank you, Chair. Particularly on the Levelling Up Fund, obviously there's been mentioned by Simon Riley, the particularly welcoming schemes that are contributing to the sort of net zero carbon emissions goals. Now, we the Council declared a climate emergency in May 2019, and 6 months later, I think, we had a dedicated officer in place. And I'm just a little surprised that people are saying there is no scheme that's sort of kind of shovel ready or even semi-shovel ready. What exactly has been happening? Now, it's a very great pity that Councillor Holmes is not actually here at the Cabinet meeting today, because I would have certainly liked to have questioned him on that. It's just a great pity. It's really pity that we haven't got something.
Which projects are you? So which projects are you suggesting should be shovel ready to the extent that's required?
We have been trying to ask Councillor Poulter what is actually being done to bring projects forward. And I'm saying we've had 2 years almost since we declared a climate emergency, and actually, what have we actually got to show for it? We should have some projects coming forward now and starting already and looking for the financing for those. And this would have been a golden opportunity to jump onto.
Okay, well, as Mr. Riley described, the criteria for this funding is not solely climate change. So, and any considerations that are ongoing with the Climate Change Board that they may or may not be bringing forward wouldn't fit, in my view, this criteria anyway. So, okay, Councillor Webb.
Such a great pity and a wasted opportunity.
Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to bring us back to the recommendations, and there's two in particular under my portfolio, and one is the bid acceptance for £433,000 Section 31 grant, which is going to help reduce crime and death associated with drug misuse. And this is a work in partnership with other organisations that provide support for drug users and trying to wean them away from this habit through our public health system, but mainly through organisations that public health contract with. And it shows how partnership works, because this money, the grant that we will be receiving, will be used to strengthen those partnerships and keep the partnership going through our public health, who will oversee that. That's item recommendation A. And the second one is a partner giving us money, so that's recommendation D, which is £804,000 to our Home First service. And this is the service that gets people out of hospital and into their own homes, or into somewhere appropriate where they can be discharged to with the relative support that they need. And that comes from the NHS into our award-winning Home First service, and that service has done a remarkable job throughout the pandemic, getting people safely into accommodation, be it their own homes or supported accommodation where appropriate. So I would like to support recommendation A and D for those reasons, and thank the teams involved for all the hard work that they have put in.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. And in actual fact, just immediately prior to this meeting, the Chief Exec and I met with the leader of the Home First team and many of their members in what we call in a recognition visit with them, to identify the effects of COVID on them and recognise their achievements in working within what's been a completely new field, and all the advantages and benefits it's given us towards partnership working. They are an award-winning team. They're obviously dedicated. They're obviously rightly very proud of their achievements, and they're obviously determined to take advantage of the benefits that they've come out of their work in the last 12 to 15 months going into the future. So absolutely right to recognise some of these teams and their efforts in the course of this last year. Great. So any other comments, questions in relation to compliance with contract and financial procedure rules? Okay, good. In that case, we've got recommendation 2.1.A to D. Can they be agreed, Cabinet?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I'll move on to item 11, which is, I haven't got the wording with me, Karen. Can you put it up, please? Item 12, the exclusion of public and press. You find it first. Here we go. The board resolves that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following item on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act, and the public interest is maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So perhaps, Dominic, you could confirm when the meeting